Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hatchery 101 webinar series by Hatchery International. My name is Ben Normand, and today I'll be the host and moderator for the discussion on water conservation. Water is the most important resource in a fish hatchery. Thoughtful and efficient use of this natural resource not only ensures production for many more years to come, but it safeguards the health and welfare of your stock. Now, before we get into questions, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsor of this webinar series, OxyGuard International, without which Hatchery 101 would not be possible. Now, without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. First, we have Mike Anderson with Grieg.
Good morning, everyone.
And we have Paul Peterson with OxyGuard.
Hello, everybody.
Now, again, I'd just like to welcome you all to the webinar. I'd like to thank you for taking the time today and to our panelists as well out of your busy days to be discussing this important topic with me today. Just a quick housekeeping note for all those attending today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you via email within 48 hours. For our viewers, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is made up of two parts. The first part of this webinar will consist of a panel discussion, and then in about the last 15 minutes or so, we transition into a Q&A section. So throughout the webinar, I'd like to invite you to submit your own questions in the Q&A box, which can be found on the bottom menu of your screen. Now, let's get into these questions. So how have you seen water usage shift over time in hatcheries? You know, one example could be, have we seen a bigger shift from flow through to RAS? Mike, maybe you'd like to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Ben. So in my direct observations, especially with us here at Grieg Seafood and our Gold River operations, we have directly seen an increase in the use of RAS facilities and a decrease in our flow-through facilities. We still utilize right now flow-through for our incubation and our first feeding, with the talks of transitioning into RAS for those systems. And all of our par, smolt, and eventually post-smolt facilities right now are in the RAS realm. So we've seen a direct decrease in flow through. It's, as we all know, important to have good water quality parameters and be able to manipulate and utilize those water quality control. And it's a lot easier to control that water quality with a RAS facility than it is with a flow through, temperature, oxygenation, and then key in on the actual nitrogen cycle. So.
Yes, I can add a little bit to that, because you can say we send equipment all over the world, and we see the same tendency. You can say there's a typical lack of water. It can be temperature, climate change, diseases that we see that is often what brings people to move from the flow-through systems into more RAS-based systems.
Very good. Thanks, guys. Where are we seeing the most water waste or consumption occurring in hatcheries? Pa, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, I can start with that. Of course, as we already started with flow-through, it gives the cells that it use a lot of water. And then you can say that then we have to look into when we talk RAS, you can say RAS, there's several steps of RAS. You can say always consider it as like a stair you go up or a ladder you go up. You can say you start to put in mechanical filtration, biofilters, and so on, so on. And you can say that probably the most water consumption is the fixed bed filter, because you have to do backwash and so on that. But of course, it depends on your degrees of RAS. You can say, are you only circulating 10% of the water or 20% of the water, or are you at 95% of the water? And that, of course, change where your water waste as such is, you can say. But you can say if you are at 95%, it also give you other areas or other problems you have to work with. Yes, so we can come back to that later.
Yeah, I think that fairly well covers the areas there. You know, water Water waste is definitely I would find in the filtration system itself, and not utilizing that properly, as well as, it kind of ties into the next question, but we'll leave that answer for them. But not utilizing your water efficiently, and trying to run a looser system, because that's the easier way to go at the start.
Well, speaking of the start, then, if you have a hatchery operator who wants to, they're convinced of the value of water. I mean, any aquaculture specialist can tell you that, but, looking at their own facility and they say, yep, I would like to increase efficiency and decrease consumption. What are some of the sort of easiest, fastest first step ways for operators and managers to reduce water consumption? And to borrow from Pa's metaphor there, which I quite like, is the first rung of the ladder, if you will.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I would encourage is to have confidence in your bioreactor. So if you have a good, well-established bioreactor, or if it's the startup of that bioreactor, you really want to push that bioreactor safely. You make sure that you're monitoring your pH, your ammonia levels, and that. But everybody's first instinct is to open up that water flow through into the system and flush out the ammonias and nitrites. But if you keep that closed and you push your bioreactor safely, you'll get better results quicker, which will allow you to run a tighter system throughout the year class. The other kind of next step is really focus on your feeding. So if you're not doing a lot of overfeeding and you're keying in on, we generally go between 500 to 900 liters per minute of kilo fed. I think I got that right. I'll double check that one. But you really want to make sure that you're not overfeeding your fish, and you're replacing the minimal amount of water with that kilograms going in.
Yes, I have nothing to add to that. I totally agree.
So, Mike, you touched on a few aspects of ways to sort of maintain good water quality while meeting the needs of your aquatic organisms, but also not sort of creating a situation where you need to consume an excess amount of water. So, as these people go through the water consumption, we touched a little bit on this, but what are the sort of considerations and solutions for ensuring animal welfare and efficiency are maintained through that process?
Yes, if I start on that, you say, of course, we already talked about it a little bit, that if you move to RAS, you say your biggest concern is, of course, clean water. And a RAS system consists of a lot of components, you can say, but your key element here probably for this is, of course, the UV, the ozone, skimmers, or fixed bed filters. That is, in fact, what create the clean water for you. I know, and you say ozone is what we see is coming back. We see a lot of companies work with ozone. It's something that have been forgotten for some time, but it's coming strong back in all different kind of systems, both in, of course, in the hatchery, but also the pre-grow out and the grow out system. We have a sister company that have spent over 6-7 years on making a new ozone generators, because in fact there have been a lack on the quality of the ozone generators too. We in OxyGuard, we have spent times on a new ozone sensors, because we think ozone, if you have to control the ozone, you have to have an ozone sensor that can measure it fast with a fast response. So in fact it will end up to be possible to control this process as it is with oxygen, you say. And ozone, along with other things, are one of the things that will bring the crystal clean water back in the system, you say. One of the parts there is, of course, the skimmers. There's still a lot of knowledge we try to learn with the skimmer, where to put them correctly and so on. We are involved in several projects with the skimmers to find out exactly where to put them, because it's not like they typically come from aquarium knowledge and so on, but it's different in a RAS system, and it could give you a lot of benefits. So we we still have things to learn, I would say.
Hmm.
But I think those 4 elements, ozone, UV, skimmers, and fixed bed filters, is quite important to keep you clean water in the system, especially in hatchery.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Paul. And to add to that, one thing that is very important with keeping it clean is the actual turnover, the retention time in the tanks themselves, as well as the spin in the tanks themselves. So if you have a self-cleaning tank with an efficient filtration system, you're essentially making an easy, comfortable environment for those fish to live in. And if you're keeping high quality water and farming the water per se, your fish will happily grow, no problems.
I was intrigued by what you said there, Mike, about farming the water, and every site's water source is going to be just a little bit different, and the unique characteristics, the layout, the gear, etc. And before you were discussing a certain flow rate that you try and hit, do you notice a lot of variance from site to site as you move through your time in Grieg there, or is it usually like you're able to kind of nail it down to that sort of one policy, if you will, that applies across the board?
There are definitely variables, from site to site. Some areas, they'll have a higher pH in their water quality, and so you may have to have a different additive added into the system. Other areas have lower pH, and that our site, we actually utilize salinity. We have the fortune of a saltwater well, so we're able to manipulate and control a skimmer a little bit better than a facility that's running a full freshwater system. But in general, with Atlantic salmon, if you have that retention time based on the size of the fish, so say at 50 grams, you're at a 45-minute turnover time, and you target 1.2 to 1.5 body lengths per second, that's pretty standard throughout the facilities.
Very good. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned before post-smolt here, and we are seeing in the industry, there's a lot of companies sort of pursuing this post-smolt growth on land to help support more efficient operations in sea cages. So this shift in production strategy, does this create new considerations around water consumption in your experience? Mike, if you'd like to lead on this one.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. It definitely does play into consideration of water consumption. The post-smolt realm is relatively new. We're definitely breaking into it in a couple of areas. The consumption of water, however, is, with the new technology that we have, is relatively low with the requirements in post-smolt. So if you have an efficient, well-built system, one of our newest builds within the Gold River hatchery area, we're down to a 97% water consumption on there. So we've got 1,973 cubic meters of volume in that system, and we're at 97% of water usage. So we're able to maintain that system roughly on about 400 to 600 liters per minute of makeup water based on the feeding. So it really comes down to your biomass in the building. As you get into post-smolt, you have larger fish, higher densities in the tank. And so that's one of the largest impacts is, you have bigger fish in the same or larger area, depending on how you built that system, but you're not going to be able to have as large a number of fish in that post-smolt facility versus what you would if you were just running smolts through.
Yes, I'm totally agree that we also see that customers are moving a little bit more in the post-smolt is moving, especially in all the salmon area, of course. And yes, we see them move a little bit more into RAS, and it also depend on location. Do they have the water sources and so on? But for the climate, we probably have to move that way, in all of us slowly.
Mm, absolutely. Well, that leads nicely into our next question here. You know, we've been talking a lot about RAS as an excellent solution in terms of water management methodology, and it's been touted as the sort of solution for the future for a variety of reasons, including, amongst others, water consumption. But we have to say, you know, there's a lot of facilities out there that are flow through. So is there a space for flow through installations in a RAS-centered future? Pa?
The easy answer is no. But of course, yes, there are. Because it is again depend on location. You can say if you have water, a lot of fresh water in the area you are, there will be no concern about it. You can say if you are in an area where you fight about the fresh water with somebody else, you definitely have to look into the RAS technology and see how you can do that. If you are with a species that are more saltwater application, you will have no problem with flow through at the moment, you can say. But you can say there will be in the future there will probably be something with how much water, how much resource you use of everything. So I don't think it's an easy answer, but yes, it is moving through that you have to be more circular in your economic and the resources you use, no matter if it's water or feed or whatever you use. So it's a no and yes answer.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I definitely agree with that, Paul. You know, where they have good, clean, free-flowing water, it's probably going to be an advantage to stick with flow through for as long as you can. However, with the way that government mandates and environmental impacts are associating, it's looking like it's more and more environmentally responsible just to turn over into the RAS systems.
Very good. Thanks, guys. Now, I know we're not climate scientists, but climate change is something that weighs on everybody's mind nowadays and touches so many aspects of both our lives and our operations. So how do you see climate change impacting our water consumption and use in hatcheries in the future? Mike, if you'd like to lead this time.
Yeah, for sure. So here on Vancouver Island, actually, this year has been one of the driest years to date, and we've actually seen a very heavy impact on our wells and our rivers on Vancouver Island. So that's a perfect example of, you know, climate change is here, we're drying up, and therefore it's, you know, pushing us to utilize RAS facilities in a much more efficient way. As you know, water consumption becomes higher within the human public as a general, we need to really focus in on how do we maintain those systems and develop those efficient systems for low water use.
Yes, I totally agree. It's stability on the water source that is all about.
Very good. Thanks, guys. Now, hatcheries, like most aquaculture sites, are becoming increasingly technologically advanced, right? And this is helping us in so many ways. So what role, though, roughly, and this is to help sort of people that maybe have not gone down this path very far yet, but what role can technology play in helping hatcheries reduce water consumption? Paul, I think you're probably the best to start with this one.
I hope so. No, as we already talked about, we are seeing it, and we have to move according to the RAS at least in some degrees, you can say. And when you start to go that way, you need much more monitoring. You say what you can say was more maybe in the future or in the past was enough with just a level sensor and oxygen sensor. Will now much more be about pump running, all other water qualities parameters like ammonium nitrate, pH, and so on. They will be much more important for you than if it just was a flow-through system, you say, because you are able to change them quite fast, or they can change quite fast for you. Then you have all the management, of course, is getting more complex. Before, as you can say, it was maybe a little bit more about the fish. Now you get a new ecosystem into your system. You have to keep track on clean water and so on is the most important for you. It's still important for the fish, but the fish live off the clean water, so you really have to keep your water in good shape. So that's management important. Then you say, if we look a little bit into the management is also where you will be able to pick up on some of all the new things coming up. We all hear about this IA machine learning area that's coming, and it's also coming into this. You can say we have been working with, we have our own management system called Kabaya, and we can just see how it brings people to better understand and make the daily work easier. Even that you still have to be a good fish farmer. You have to know what you're doing, but it helps you. It's like when you drive your car, now you have your nav on, you can say, even you even know where to go, you can say, but the nav just help you anyway, you can say, and makes it sometimes a little bit easier. So that is what we will see in the management and yes, all this kind of thing. So it is important tool. This is a tool you cannot afford not to have. You need to have it in some degrees. You can say the more you go up the RAS ladder again, yes, then the more is needed, you can say, to keep, because fish farm is not about what you do, it's what you forget to do a lot of it.
Yeah, I fully agree with that statement. And you know, we have within Grieg Seafood and at the Gold River Hatchery with our latest building, the Frodo Matheson building, we put a lot of technology into that system. So all of our incoming water is automated. All of our tanks are automated. Basically, the whole system is automated to the point that it almost becomes a little bit too efficient for technicians, and it's easy to forget how to maintain the manual system if need be. It is important though with technology that you do have the ability to revert, because the challenging part with technology is that computers fail, and we still need to be able to keep fish alive. And so being able to build into your systems that manual override is key in keeping those fish alive. But technology definitely is the way of the future. Controlling the amount of makeup water coming in, being able to just key in, okay, I've fed out X amount of kilos this day. The computer then learns how many kilos it's going to do each day, and it automatically controls that water level coming into your building. And then that's truly the best way of maintaining the efficiency of water, because you've removed the human error element of it, but make sure you always have that backup for the human error. So,
well, and I don't know that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yes, I would just add on that you just have to remember that we are selling security, you can say, and the most important, I always tell the client, is that it should work with before we come and install anything. So when the farm runs first, then we can install all the optimization and all the things you need, but you have to be able to run the farm without anything on, because then we guarantee it breaks down in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And the only thing you don't want in a farm is sound or silence. Yes. That is what kills your business. So it's really important with security, but we can talk about that another day.
Absolutely. And I don't know that you can fully convince fish farmers not to go out and take a look at the fish every once in a while themselves, maybe feed by hand too. There's always something to be gained from that nuance, isn't there?
Well, that's truly the most important piece for technology, is so that you as the farmer can actually go out and enjoy your fish and not have to worry about whether or not the system is running effectively with automation, and just kick back, throw a couple of scoops of hand feed, and really pay attention to those fish.
Absolutely. So keeping on this technology discussion here, there's so many utterly fascinating things happening in development of technology in aquaculture, both in salt land, freshwater, in all spaces, really. So thinking forward to the future and kind of putting on our imagination hats here, guys, what are some of the sort of up and coming water conservation technologies that we're seeing coming down the pipe Mike, maybe you can lead with this one, because I imagine there's more than a few people trying to sell you to them.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, we're seeing a large push towards denitrification. So utilizing systems that actually are using bacteria to remove the nitrate versus water, replacing the, amount of makeup water to replace the nitrates in the system. And so having that denitrification filter or the technology there for denitrification is allowing you to run almost, I would say, 100% closed system. There are some new systems out there that are utilizing that technology, but again, it's quite new, especially in the aquaculture world. In the aquarium world, specifically the saltwater aquarium world, it's technology that's been utilized for quite some time, but it's developing it into that high performance commercial aspect that's a little bit more challenging. And then the other key piece of is our push towards carbon reduction. So utilizing technology that more solar technology, more wind power technology in that aspect for creating power for the systems. That's the other large push for, it not only helps with having more advanced systems for water consumption, but having more advanced systems for energy consumption as well.
Yes, I agree, and I will add on to that we also see a project where you build a agriculture farm beside it, you can say, where you have plants over there, where you reuse the water, where you now have nutrition in, so you don't need to go to the nitrification part. You can just dilute you a little bit out of that problem, and then you reuse the whole thing for, instead of do artificial water there, you can just use the water from the fish farm to that, you can say. So we see also a project that will do like that.
So we've looked at our water, we've looked at our technology. So just wrapping it all together in a nice little package here. Again, budget is no concern, great fresh water source, whatever you got. What does peak efficiency look like to you in terms of water consumption? Pa, if you'd like to go ahead here.
Yes, I would say a little bit about this peak. You say if we look at efficiency on a RAS farm, if we start in the other end, I would say one of the peak where you waste a lot of water is definitely when we start to perch on the fish because of the off flavor and so on. We use a lot of water on that. We go to the other end, you can say, and if you have a RAS farm where you have a recirculation degrees of 95, you're probably at the peak at the moment. It's really, really high. Some claim that 98 or something, but let's just say if you go to 95, it's really, really good. You would say economical, maybe it could be a good idea just to go, because it's still about a location. Where are you? What is the demand? What's the government's regulation around the area you are in? But I would say at degrees of 70 to 80%, and maybe you then can reuse the water to something else. That is probably business-wise a really, really good idea to start with, you can say, because the last 10, 15% is where it starts to get quite complex in a RAS system. And denitrification and so on is not easy to control, you can say, and you really have to up on your management when you start to work with that. I think Mike can add a lot on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And again, the peak efficiency, like Paul is mentioning there, it's at the end of the cycle. So the water has gone through the building, and what's that end water coming out of that building? How are you managing the effluent system well? Are you reclaiming water from dehydrating the effluent waste? Are you making sure that you're running an efficient turnover time in your tanks so that you have the cleanest water in the system and able to reduce your incoming makeup water, and making sure that you're running your drum filters. They're not, or whatever filter that you're running, it's not constantly spraying down and cleaning itself. It's set up efficiently. Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Just kind of wrapping it all up here. Is there any parting thoughts or wisdom you'd like to leave our viewers with? What are the sort of real tidbits you'd like to leave operators with who are looking to reduce water consumption? Mike?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go back to that statement that I made earlier. If you key in on farming your water and farming your bacteria, making sure your water is set up well, your fish are going to grow easily. So make sure that you've set your system up well, you have good turnover times, your tanks are self-cleaning, and your bacteria and system is efficient, and your fish will be happy.
Yes, I totally agree on that. I think that no matter what, you have to go into the RAS in some way, because the climate, we all see the climate change. It will affect us all, and both in the way we can produce, but also maybe in the way we get allowed to produce. You can say there will be a lot of demand from a lot of different corners. So it is definitely the way forward. And then you can say, we already talked earlier today of degrees of RAS and so on, but you have to start to get into it, you can say.
Very good. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, they say. So thank you very much, guys. We're at the end of our formal question and discussion period here. Thanks again for taking the time to discuss this with us today, Pa and Mike. I'd like to invite you both to click off your video for a moment, take a quick break, grab a drink of water, and we'll see, and then I'll invite the attendees. This is your time to submit your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll have our panelists answer them as they come through. So we'll tune back in just a moment here. Alrighty, folks, we're going to wrap things up a little early today. I'd like to thank our panelists once again for donating their time today to discuss this important topic. And to Mike and Pa, I say thank you very much. Thank you to the viewers for submitting or for participating in our webinar today and participating in this broadcast as well. And once again, thanks goes out to our webinar series sponsor, OxyGuard International. Now, before we go today, I'd like to invite you all to attend part 4 of this year's series on sustainability with Hatchery International, or sorry, Hatchery 101. And then we are looking at waste management that day, and it's taking place on November 15th. Now, if you've signed up for the series already, you're automatically signed up for that webinar. But if you have not, then please feel free to go sign up and share with your colleagues and networks. Thanks again, everybody.